Welcome to Rising Parent, where we dive deep into the joys of parenting. Today, we're embarking on a magical journey, the world of early literacy. Learning to read is a milestone for every child, opening doors to imagination, knowledge, and a lifetime of adventure. In this episode, our guest speakers will dive deep into Tim's article on the importance of early reading skills, discover effective teaching strategies, and learn how to cultivate a lifelong love of books in your little ones. We'll share tips on creating a supportive reading environment, choosing the right books, and celebrating every reading milestone. Let's embark on this reading adventure together.
Welcome, everyone, especially all of you parents and childcare providers listening. We really appreciate you joining us for this deep dive into helping children learn to read.
It's great to be here.
We're going to be looking at a piece from Rising Parent called Unlocking the Magic of Reading. I'm really fascinated by how it frames early literacy.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I'd like to give a shout out to two incredible people who are doing some really, really great work in this area, Edna and Tim.
Oh, absolutely.
Not only are they licensed childcare providers with over 20 years of experience working with children and families, they also founded Selfless Outreach, which is a nonprofit mobile food bank that's making a real difference.
They're really inspirational.
For sure. So you can check out their work at selflessoutreach.org. And hey, maybe even hit that donate button while you're there.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so let's get back to our main topic. The article really emphasizes the importance of early reading skills. But it goes beyond just the usual kids will do better in school argument.
Right. It highlights how early reading impacts a child's entire development. Cognitive, social, and emotional.
Yeah.
For example, think about a child trying to express their feelings. If they have a limited vocabulary, it's like trying to paint a masterpiece with only a few colors. Reading opens up this whole palette of words to express themselves more clearly and connect with others.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's not just about reading for information. It's about reading for connection and emotional intelligence.
Exactly. And the article cites some research showing a link between early reading and increased self-esteem.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When children feel confident in their reading abilities, it kind of spills over into other areas of their lives. They're more likely to take risks, try new things, and just believe in themselves.
That makes a lot of sense. So, okay, we've established that early reading is crucial. But the article doesn't paint it as some kind of pressure cooker race to, learn everything right away. It acknowledges that every child learns at their own pace.
Absolutely. It does a great job of breaking down the stages of reading development in a way that feels manageable for parents.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's not about pushing kids to read chapter books by kindergarten. It's about understanding the building blocks and supporting them at each step.
So let's talk about those building blocks. I remember learning about things like phonemic awareness and phonics.
Yeah.
Back in my teacher training days, but it all felt kind of jargony. Can you break it down for our listeners who might not be familiar with those terms?
Sure. So think of it like this phonemic awareness is the ability to hear and manipulate the sounds in words. It's like being a sound detective, noticing that cat starts with the same sound as cup and ends with the same sound as hat.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's all about tuning into those individual sounds.
Correct.
That makes sense. And then phonics comes in.
Exactly. Phonics builds on that foundation of phonemic awareness by teaching children the relationship between those sounds and the letters that represent them. It's the decoding piece. Understanding that the sound C can be represented by the letter C as in cat, but also by the letter K as in kite.
So phonemic awareness is the ear, and phonics is the eye connecting to the sounds.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and these skills kind of work together to help children unlock the code of reading.
That makes sense. But it doesn't stop there. The article also emphasizes the importance of building vocabulary.
Absolutely. Vocabulary is like the treasure chest of reading.
Right.
The more words a child knows, the richer their understanding of the text will be. They can make connections, visualize scenes more vividly, and really engage with the story.
Yeah, it's like the difference between reading a bare-bones instruction manual and getting lost in a beautifully written novel.
Totally.
Vocabulary brings the words to life.
It does. And the article makes a crucial point about how these different elements of reading development don't necessarily happen in a linear fashion.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Some kids might pick up phonics quickly but struggle with vocabulary, while others might have a natural ear for sounds but take a little bit longer to grasp those letter sound connections.
That's so important to remember.
Yeah.
Every child is on their own reading journey. It's not a one-size-fits-all process.
And that's why the article stresses the importance of adapting our approach to each child's unique learning style.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Some kids might thrive on structured activities, while others might need more hands-on play-based learning experiences. It's about finding what clicks for each individual child.
Yeah, it's about meeting them where they are and finding those aha moments that spark their love of reading. Speaking of which, the article dives into some specific strategies for helping kids learn to read. What stood out to you in that section?
Well, I really liked that the article doesn't promote any complicated or expensive programs. It focuses on simple, practical strategies that any parent or caregiver can implement.
Yeah.
Even on a busy schedule, I'm all for simplicity. What are some of the strategies that caught your eye? Well, one that I think is often underestimated is the power of reading aloud. We tend to think of it as something we do with very young children, but the article emphasizes how beneficial it can be for kids of all ages.
Oh, really?
Yeah, even those who are already reading independently.
Why is that? I admit, once my kids started reading on their own, I kind of phased out the read-alouds. Was that a mistake?
It might have been. Here's why. Reading aloud exposes children to a wider range of vocabulary and sentence structures than they might encounter in their own reading. It also allows them to hear fluent reading modeled, which can improve their own reading fluency and comprehension. And let's not forget the bonding aspect. Snuggling up with a good book creates those special moments of connection that kids cherish.
Okay, you've convinced me read-alouds are back on the menu. But how do we make them more engaging? I don't want it to feel like a chore for either of us.
The article suggests making it interactive. Ask questions, encourage predictions, and even act out scenes together. It's about bringing the story to life.
I love that. It's about turning it into a shared experience rather than just a passive activity. What other strategies does the article recommend?
Well, it mentions flashcards as a classic but effective tool for building phonemic awareness and phonics skills. And I know some people roll their eyes at flashcards, but they can be really helpful for reinforcing those letter-sound connections.
Yeah, I have to admit, I do have a bit of a love-hate relationship with flashcards. They can feel a bit drill and kill if we're not careful. Any tips for making them more fun?
Absolutely. The key is to make it a game. Turn it into a matching game, a memory game, or even a scavenger hunt around the house. Get creative.
Those are great ideas. And it ties into that point about adapting to different learning styles. What works for one child might not work for another. Speaking of adapting, the article also touches on those interactive reading apps and websites that are everywhere these days. I'm curious to hear your take on those.
That's a great question. It's definitely a topic that sparks a lot of debate. I think it's important to approach these digital tools with a critical eye. While some can be incredibly beneficial, others might be nothing more than glorified screen time.
So how do we tell the difference? What should we be looking for in a good reading app?
I always encourage parents to look for apps that go beyond just repetitive drills. The best ones combine entertainment with opportunities for kids to practice comprehension, critical thinking, and creative expression.
So it's about finding that balance between engagement and educational value.
Exactly. And it's also important to remember that these apps should complement, not replace other reading activities like reading aloud and interacting with real books.
That's a great point. It's about using technology as a tool to enhance the reading experience, not as a substitute for it. Okay, so we've got our read-alouds, our interactive flashcards, and our carefully curated selection of reading apps. But the article also mentions a specific reading program that seems to be getting a lot of buzz.
Yes. And what intrigued me about this particular program is its multi-sensory approach to phonics. They use games, music, and even movement to help kids connect letter sounds with their physical representations. It's like phonics meets dance party.
That sounds amazing. It's so important to make learning fun and engaging, especially for young children. But I know a lot of parents worry about falling into the trap of pushing their kids too hard too fast.
And that's a valid concern. The article emphasizes that learning to read is a journey, not a race. It's about celebrating those small wins along the way and focusing on building a love of reading, not just ticking boxes on a checklist.
So patience is key.
Absolutely. And I think that applies to both the child and the adult. There will be moments of frustration, but it's important to remember that every child learns at their own pace. The key is to provide consistent support, create a positive and encouraging environment, and most importantly, make it fun.
I love that. Now, we've talked about the different stages of reading development. We've explored some effective strategies, and we've even touched on the role of technology. But how do we actually make this happen in our busy lives? How do we create a reading routine that sticks?
That's where consistency comes in. Just like we make time for meals and bedtime routines, we need to carve out dedicated reading time each day. And it doesn't have to be a huge chunk of time. Even 15 minutes of focused reading can make a world of difference.
Okay, so it's about making it a non-negotiable part of our daily schedule. But let's be realistic. Life happens. Some days are crazier than others. Any tips for those days when things go off the rails?
Flexibility is key. If you can't squeeze in a full reading session, maybe you can read a short story together before bed or listen to an audiobook in the car. The key is to find those little pockets of time and make the most of them.
I love that. It's about being adaptable and finding those moments to connect with books, even when our schedules are packed. But even with the best of intentions, sometimes it can be a struggle to get kids excited about reading. Any advice for those parents who are facing a bit of resistance?
I think one of the most powerful things we can do is model a love of reading ourselves. Kids are incredibly perceptive, and they pick up on our attitudes and behaviors. If they see us reading for pleasure, they're more likely to view it as a positive and enjoyable activity.
That's so true. It's about creating a culture of reading in our homes. And speaking of making reading enjoyable, the article also emphasizes the importance of choosing the right books.
Absolutely. Finding books that align with a child's interests is crucial for sparking their enthusiasm. Think about their favorite hobbies, characters, or themes.
So if my child is obsessed with dinosaurs, I should be hitting at the paleontology section of the library.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to explore different genres. Expose them to fiction, nonfiction poetry, graphic novels. The whole literary world is their oyster.
I love that analogy. It's about opening their minds to the endless possibilities of reading. But what about reading level? How do we make sure the books aren't too easy or too challenging?
That's where a little bit of trial and error comes in. You can consult age recommendations, but ultimately it's about finding books that strike that sweet spot, challenging enough to keep them engaged, but not so difficult that they get frustrated.
Yeah, and I think that's a good reminder for us as adults, too. Sometimes we get so caught up in the shoulds of reading, the classics we think we should be reading, the number of books we should be finishing, that we forget to just enjoy the process.
Totally. Reading should be a source of joy and wonder, not a chore or a competition. And that's something we need to convey to children as well.
For sure. And the article actually offers some really nice suggestions for how to do that, specifically around celebrating reading milestones. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I love the idea of celebrating reading milestones. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. A special sticker chart, a trip to the bookstore, or even just a heartfelt high five can go a long way in reinforcing a child's love of reading.
It's about acknowledging their effort and progress.
Exactly. And it ties back to that idea of making reading a positive and rewarding experience. When we celebrate reading milestones, we're sending the message that reading is something to be valued and cherished.
And that it's a journey worth celebrating. Speaking of celebrations, I think it's time for us to give another shout out to Edna and Tim for the incredible work they're doing with selfless outreach. Providing access to nutritious food is so essential for families, especially those with young children. It's hard to focus on learning when you're hungry.
Absolutely. Food insecurity is a major barrier to educational success. So the work that Edna and Tim are doing is truly making a difference in the lives of children and families.
If you haven't already, be sure to check out their website at selflessoutreach.org and consider making a donation. Every little bit helps. All right, as we wrap up this deep dive into the magical world of reading, what's one key takeaway you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I think the most important message is that every child has the potential to become a reader. It's about finding the right approach, providing consistent support, and above all, nurturing a love of reading that will last a lifetime.
That's a great point. And I think it's a message that applies to all of us, not just children. Whether we're reading bedtime stories, exploring new genres, or simply rediscovering the joy of getting lost in a good book. Let's keep the magic of reading alive in our own lives and in the lives of those around us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.